Iluria, an epic fantasy poem by Charles Lake. Prologue, another land. Iluria slowly tumbled through space like a pancake tossed into the air, 25,000 miles across, where brownies once lived without any care, filled with marvelous beauty and mystical lands with a glorious pink sky above. The citizens govern this magical realm with kindness, justice, and love. The goddess Ithania formed this flat world 32 billion years ago, the most wondrous place in another dimension where many humans in their dreams would go. When a powerful magnetic storm happens on Earth, it sometimes carries people there. That is how Philip and Tina arrived and witnessed beauty beyond compare. They also knew terrible horror as well, against the unthinkable one. But with the help of their new friends, Elisa and Garsha, even the darkest day could be won. Garsha the Dream Lord. To those who know that love can save a soul. At 16 years old, he was brilliant and wise and dreamed the most wonderful dreams. He made a pilgrimage to a distant land with a beautiful future, it seems. At the Temple of Dreams he met Elisa, who became his greatest love, then quickly became the scholar of ages. His mind soared beyond bounds like a dove. He practiced deep dreaming beneath the great dome of the wondrous Temple of Dreams. Yet to spend all his days with his true love, Elisa, was the greatest of all of his schemes. He developed his skills past all understanding, with powers beyond belief, floating objects in air with such perfect control that he penned many books in his sleep. But he started to have unimaginable nightmares so bad that he'd scream and cry. Yet he had always been brave and strong. Almost anyone else would just die. There was something beyond the world of dreams that was trying to take over his mind. One night it became too much for him, so to everything else he was blind. It dragged his dream body past the walls of existence, where he saw the unthinkable one. But it had partially hidden itself, otherwise his life would be done. It made him believe it had killed Elisa in a terribly horrible way. Then his mind snapped awake in the dark of his room with a vengeance his soul could not stay. The unthinkable sent him incredible power straight to his subconscious brain, while the grief he felt from losing Elisa was enough to drive him insane. Every ancient sword throughout the world of Iluria suddenly began to rise, for Garsha would slay the unthinkable one and destroy its most hideous guise. The ancient swords began to rotate and race toward the Temple of Dreams. No force in the world could hold them back, over mountains, forests, or streams. Elisa felt the temple shaking and ran down the hall to his room. She found that the great dome was solidly locked. Through the keyhole she saw only gloom. She knew that something was desperately wrong and began crying out his name. But Garsha thought she was already dead, so this was the unthinkable's game. Yet Elisa kept calling. She'd never give up, and Garsha finally heard. But the unthinkable had such a grip on his mind it made him discredit her word. "It's Elisa's killer," the unthinkable said. "It's coming in here to kill you." In Garsha's despair he believed what it said, and thought his whole life future was through. But he loved her so much that deep in his mind a glimmer of hope shined bright. He still heard Elisa calling his name, reaching through his terrible fright. He knew she was out there and stepped toward the door, but suddenly his spirit was racked. The unthinkable exerted such terrible force that Garsha's whole being was cracked. With incredible agony he started to split. Two halves of his spirit were torn. One half knowing Elisa still lived, the other enraged and forlorn. Half his spirit ripped out of his body and formed into a shadowy being. In terrible fear, Garsha couldn't believe what he was actually seeing. It was a darkly sparkling image of him, with a lost and wild look in its eyes. Yet in Garsha's horror he still heard Elisa, so paid no heed to the unthinkable's lies. He sprang toward the door and flew through the air, but his shadow shot lightning at him. It could not let Elisa's killer enter the room, for then its own fate would be grim. Yet Garsha's great leap reached the mighty door, and he slammed the key into the bolts, then yanked the door open and dove outside, nearly struck by millions of volts. He carried Elisa down to the floor and safely out of harm's way, then kicked the huge door shut with both legs and jammed in the bolt for its stay. He and Elisa fled the Temple of Dreams, fearing they'd never see it again, while swords rushed inside and slew the Dream Lords, leaving no life in their den. But he and Elisa would one day be back to destroy the unthinkable schemes. Along with their human friends, Philip and Tina, they would keep alive magic's dreams.